Hey there, it's Prakash again. Today I wanted to talk to you about the anatomy of our no-code API builder. So anytime you click into an API endpoint, you're going to see something that looks like this. Now today we're going to cover this at a very high level, but there are many more videos that show you all the cool things that you can do with this tool. So let's go ahead and get started. There are three sections to know about. The first is inputs, right? And these are inputs that come from your front end. So as an example, if you were building a user sign-up application or the user sign-up in an application, the inputs that you would have would be probably your name, your email address, and your password, right? The second thing is the function stack. So the function stack are basically functions that get executed when this API endpoint is called. And then the final thing is the response, and that is what is being returned to the front end or whatever service you connect this API endpoint to, what is being returned after this API endpoint executes. So these are the three sections. In this specific one, there are no inputs. There's only one function being executed, and that's go to the user database table and return all of the users back as the variable user, and then return that to the front end, right? And you can test that by clicking Run and Debug over here and clicking Run, right? And I can see that there are two records stored in this user variable. So just a note about variables, and I cover this in depth in a variables and data transformation series in our documentation, and you can access that here, is that they get passed along and down the function stack. So let me give you an example. So query all records is returning this user variable. If I wanted to add another function, I'm going to go ahead and add another variable, right? A variable is like an empty container, and you can put anything within it. And I'm just going to call this variable just names, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the existing variable. So var is variable. I'm going to select user because that's what's being returned from this function, right? And so with user, if I just did .name, okay, I'm using dot notation to access the name, and again, I cover that here. Then when I save it, instead of returning user, I'm going to return the just names variable, okay? And I'll save that here, and I'm going to run and debug it, and in theory, I should just get back two names, right? Prakash and Sean. Now, if I just wanted the very first name, right, I could use dot notation again and hit .0 name. And then I could run it. And by the way, for those of you that don't know, in programming, the 0th element is actually the first element. And you can see that it's Prakash, and you can even do things like on that, I'll add a filter and I'll make it lowercase, right? So I will do to lower, and I'm going to hit save. And you can see that what it's doing is it's a variable called just names. It's taking that existing user variable from here. It's getting the first element, the name element, and it's lowercasing it, right? Because I had the capital P in my name. So if I run it again, I should just see lowercase Prakash. So this should give you a very high-level example of not only how the function stack works, the no-code API builder works, but how variables are passed from function to function, and you can transform things any way that you want. A couple other things that I want to cover here are the settings. If you click on this public API endpoint, that kind of gets you into the high-level settings. You can change the query name right over here, the description, the verb that it gets executed under, and then authentication. So let's say I wanted someone to authenticate and log in before they use this. I would change this authentication to user authentication. And then response caching, which is a whole other topic, and basically that gets into how you can save the response to serve it faster to the users. So I'm going to close this for now. There's a couple more things in these triple dots. There's the version history. So as I make edits, I generate new versions. So if you mess up and you want to roll back, you're able to do that. Those are for our paid plans. Request history. So if you're hitting this API endpoint and you want to see, for example, webhooks coming in or just the request history coming in to see if it was successful, that's what this is. You can clone any specific API endpoint, or let's say you built a lot of business logic here, like 20 lines deep, and you wanted to convert that into a function, you could just hit these three dots and convert to a function here. Final things just to note. Documentation is documentation specific to this API endpoint, right? So if you're working with a team of front-end engineers, you could click that and see it. Endpoint URL, that copies the endpoint URL to your clipboard so you can paste it into any front end. The database preview allows you to quickly look at the database tables you have in the schema. So you know how I knew that it was user.name? Well, if I didn't remember that, I could just click DB preview, look at, okay, it's user.name, and that's how I would use dot notation to call the that specific name value. And then finally, snippets. And snippets are something I'll cover separately, but if you wanted a way to share this API endpoint along with the associated database tables and everything, you can actually generate a snippet to do that. So I hope this has been a helpful overview of the API endpoint. We'll see you in the next video.